Perfect. So we're recording this session so that any other members can kind of view it later. But welcome to the Korea and Canada Classroom Ready Resource webinar. We have been working hard for the last few weeks or months in order to get this prepared, so we're pretty excited. But I do want to start us out in a good way with a land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge that we are gathered in the territories of various Indigenous peoples, and we further recognize their stewardship of these lands in which we live, learn, work, and play, honoring that we're coming from all over the province. So I am in Niagara, so I am grateful to the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe who gift me with sharing this land so that I can learn and work and raise a family here. And I'm truly grateful. Yeah, so who we are, OHASSTA. So we are basically a group of volunteer teachers all throughout Ontario. We've been an organization since 1978, and we continue to listen to the voices of teachers all over Ontario, especially teaching history and social sciences, and try to support them in any way we possibly can through creating resources, writing blogs, connecting teachers through different kind of workshops or programs or writing projects. And we also do things like this, which is host webinars and bring amazing educators like Amanda and Korto to kind of share what they've been working on, answer any questions. But ideally what we want to do is create a network of teachers all across the province. So I don't want to take up too much time here. I do want to turn it over and introduce you to the two writers on this project, which are Amanda and Korto. There is a chat feature, so feel free, I'll monitor the chat. Feel free to post any questions in there and they will answer them for sure. But I'll let you two introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Amanda Pike. So as Sarah said, I'm a teacher at the secondary level, and I am a history, religion, world studies teacher, but currently I am the student success teacher at my high school.
Hello, my name is Korto Zambeli-Tardif. I teach French and Canadian World Studies in Toronto. I am currently on the executive of OHASSTA, and I'm delighted that we're all here today.
So maybe just to explain how we'll proceed. You will be shared the link with all these resources, but Korto and I decided to each just pick one of our resources that we developed and kind of go through the process and show you what we were thinking are, our choices and how each of these lessons will basically work. And so I'll start. The one I chose to present to you guys today is called The Many Stories. And this is a lesson developed at the grade 6 level. However, we developed all our lessons for grade 6 and grade 10. So we will show you that at the end as well. So how do many stories shape what we know about the Korean War? This lesson in particular really explored different stories. So we're looking at really a lesson on different perspectives, and through videos, articles, book excerpts. So we're really looking at primary resources, interviews. How do these short stories really shape what we know about the Korean War? So we have, followed what we always know, the minds on, the action, and then the consolidation. And that's how we'll present that to you today. And we're really focusing on inquiry questions, like I said, primary sources as much as possible. So when we're looking at how do many stories shape what we know about the Korean War, what we're looking is that there are so many different perspectives that we could really explore and study. Okay. So one of the things we really want is for the students to just have a general understanding of the Korean War before starting this lesson. And therefore, like I say here, we're going to start with a short video. And there's so many great videos out there, but we picked one that, in the time that we're presenting this, we're looking at about maybe a 40-minute lesson. It's a short video, about 3 minutes, that will give you an overall understanding of the Korean War. Okay, and we're really looking here at having the students reflect just through that video what they learned and be prepared for the action part. So what I decided to do really is we picked 6 perspectives from the Korean War that the students will get to explore in small groups. Obviously, everything here is designed so you can adapt it to your classroom, to your style, and to be able to take and to develop it and make it into your own. However, we've given you the building blocks to really just be able to take this and hopefully introduce that to your classroom. So this is an activity designed through stations. So we do have here the worksheet that is your starting off point. And we're really looking at these 6 perspectives. And the students will be filling out this worksheet as they move from station to station. There is a note, some of these are experts, some of this is written transcripts of interviews, but we also have video resources where the students will actually get to engage into video interviews with some different perspectives. Okay, and we're looking at 2 questions here. We're looking at really for the students to be able to identify what they've learned through the different perspectives, what information can they gather about the Korean War, and then looking at the other side of what perspectives are missing. What information is missing? What would they like to know about the Korean War that they did not learn through these stories? And these are essentially the 6 stories that we've chosen to present in this lesson. And what you're going to notice here is there's a worksheet or basically a handout for each of these. But you have access, and some of them, as you see, we have Gerard Bessignol and Jessie Chenever, who have video links. We have a book excerpt. We have different interviews. And we're sharing the perspectives of a French-Canadian veteran, a Canadian veteran, a woman veteran. In this case, we're looking at a nurse. We have a Korean-Canadian military doctor. We have an Inuit veteran of the Korean War. And then we have a Korean who has moved to Canada. So we have to try to present different perspectives. And there's obviously stories here that are missing. And that's a little bit of kind of the point when we talk about grade 10, we'll try to see where we go in the next step there. We tried to keep them simple, short, visual. And when we're looking at the videos in particular, we have identified specific sections and excerpts of those interviews that we find will really be able to help the students answer those questions that they're looking at. For the consolidation, we're really looking at it in class discussion as the first part with 2 questions that we're going to discuss. After exploring these 6 perspectives, do we find that our perspective of the Korean War has changed? Have we learned anything new? In what ways is the Korean War important in Canadian history? Why are we talking about it? Why should it be remembered? And then, depending on time, what we look at is going to the next step is you can incorporate a writing prompt, and the lesson will include some suggestions there. And so these lessons, like I said, are developed to really be within a period. Okay, so about 40 minutes, and hopefully that would be, enough time. However, what I was going to say after is we do have for everybody suggestions on how to go further. If we want to explore further these lessons, what can we do? We offer you some of those suggestions as well. Korto and I, like I said, we also took every lesson and we developed it for the grade 10 level. And what's nice with these lessons is that whether it's grade 6 or grade 10, essentially a lot of these resources are the same. What we're looking at though is how do we use them and how do we go further in grade 10? So here what we have is really instead of just what do we know, it's how do we decide which stories are important to tell in grade 10, and having the students really reflect on who's choosing these stories, how do we choose them, and what do these different perspectives teach us about, an event. Here we are taking the same 6 resources we used in the grade 6, but and kind of still in that group, the different stations, but here we're looking more of something a bit more interactive with the graffiti style task, big chart paper. And the students are really just are going to explore through, writing keywords, facts, things they learned, and like creating that graffiti art that we can actually put in the classroom after and have them explore. Once that is done, the students will then be able to really work on co-constructing a short textbook interpretation of the career from what you've learned. Now we're having this writing prompt of you're going to create, a textbook, and the kids use these all the time. So say kind of like, what would you include in this textbook? What do you find would be important to include? And then we're going to take it a step further, and then we're going to have them really reflect on what perspectives are missing. Okay, we've chosen 6, but there's so many different stories that are not included. Why? How does that change our perspective? Okay, does adding a different perspective really change the way we view and understand the Korean War? And in the actual lesson, we give suggestions of these are the things. So if the students are stuck, it gives you an idea of okay, maybe guide them through, right? What about this perspective? Have we thought about this? And then you see here in the corner, there is an activity sheet that goes with the activity that students will also be able to fill out as they're going through the stations, and have them reflect on that. And then like I said, I'm just coming back to this, included in each lesson, are teacher supports. So before starting, depending on your comfort level with the knowledge about the Korean War, what are some things that maybe could help you be better prepared, and quick, short resources that will help you get a better understanding and background. And like I said, going further, we've introduced ideas on how to take the lessons further, if that is something that is, of interest to you.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Now, Amanda, let me just verify you're comfortable with continuing to click through the presentation wonderful. Thank you so much. Now, hello, everyone. I will be presenting in depth a grade 10 lesson that I created. I will be tying it back to how the lesson can be how the lesson was adapted for grade 6 at the end of my explanation. Once again, between Amanda and I, we designed 4 complete lessons with a version for grade 6 and a version for grade 10 each. So 8 lessons overall, but there is the same general thrust to the inquiry in each of the lessons, with adaptations to the specific curriculum and mental demands, cognitive demands of each grade level. All right, so I will be presenting a lesson design for grade 10. One of the most enchanting things that I have learned while working on this project is that during the Korean War, 2 battalions of the Canadian Armed Forces played a hockey game when they were stationed in Korea, which, believe it or not, is not a sport that most Koreans would associate with their homeland. And that game is now commemorated in the Imjin Classic, which is played every year in, I believe, Under Bay. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And it commemorates Canada's presence in the Korean War every year. Played by people who are currently members of those 2 battalions in the present. So in this lesson on the Imjin Classic, students are going to study primary and secondary sources related to the Imjin Classic, specifically how the Imjin Classic has been captured by the news media in the past couple of years. Students are going to view and annotate videos, and they're going to use collaborative, visible thinking strategies to answer this inquiry question. Is hockey a significant part of the Korean War's legacy? And those of you who are experienced in teaching history and social studies will probably recognize that significance is one of our key terms. It is one of our social studies or historical thinking concepts. So this lesson for grade 10 specifically will be about criteria-based thinking, as we will see on the next slide. So the core of this lesson, especially for grade 10, is whether or not students are thinking based on criteria to establish the historical significance of an event. In this case, it is a combination of both the original hockey game itself, played in 1952, or the event that commemorates it now in the 2020s, the Imjin Classic, which is still played today. So for at the grade 10 level, certainly, This is designed to be part of an ongoing suite of assessments for learning that you can apply in your class and determine whether or not your students are using the criteria for historical significance. Now, we recognize that if you use this lesson, you may be using it, this month of May, Asian Heritage Month, and that you will almost certainly have established criteria for historical significance in your own class. So we have proposed criteria to use. This is a framework for historical significance called the 5 R's. Is it remembered? Did it result in change? Is it remarkable? Is it resonant? And is it revealing? And the lesson materials that we have provided on the OHASSTA portal website have, of course, specific criteria for each of these criteria. I'm sorry that I had to repeat that word twice. But of course, you may adapt this in any way you wish if your students are more familiar with different criteria for historical significance. The students will be answering these questions. Do I have evidence that this criterion applies? What source does this evidence come from? And does the evidence tell us about the Canada-Korea relationship specifically? The question of the relationship between the two countries will be the center of the grade 6 lesson, but it is relevant in both. Of course, interrelationships are a grade 6 concept, not a grade 10 concept, but obviously we want to see growth and interconnections in all of our social studies science courses. Okay, so the mind's on. We'll start with looking at images. Now, Rachel, Ms. Kalasha, who is here with us in the webinar today, has done absolutely wonderful work with Stank, hello Rachel, finding all of these wonderful primary source photographs of the Korean War, and in this case specifically the Imjin Classic, that we are very pleased to share with you in this lesson package. So here we have, for example, the grade 10 lesson will start with a series of images capturing the original Imjin, the original hockey game, played on the Imjin River in Korea. And this is a very simple protocol. What did the students see? Not what they imagine, what they actually see in the photo. Then what do you think about that? And then what does it make you wonder? So to start from what is actually in the photo and then developing what might be true about the photo or what might not be true about the photo based on that. There is a second one. If we click. So that was sort of a distant shot, and this one is a closer view of some of the players of the original, I believe it's the Van Dews and the Princess Patricias. Yes, light artillery rifles, I believe. All right, so these would be the primary sources, of course, that we would start the lesson with. Next. Yes, so the main action of the lesson involves students, ideally starting in pairs, interpreting footage and quotes of news coverage of the Imjin Classic. So here, for example, we have the transcripts of several quotes from CBC News coverage of the Imjin Classic commemoration event from 2015. And now if we just slowly click a couple of times, you'll see how the students are going to progress through this. We suggest some annotation symbols that they can use to annotate these quotes and these partial transcripts. So I don't understand. Star if we're going to enter evidence of the Canada-Korea relationship on our worksheet tracker document. Use R for the 5 R's or any other symbol that you think is appropriate. Again, if you're using different criteria for historical significance, and a little infinity symbol for personal connections. And then we're going to click 1, 2, 3 times. The first video is actually South Korean coverage of Canadians playing the Imjin Classic. I found the discovery of this video indispensable to capture a Korean perspective on this event that is related to their country, but is not in a curious way fundamentally about Koreans. The Imjin Classic is about Canadians, and largely white Canadians, commemorating an event that either they participated in the 1950s, or an event that their battalion, to which they now belong, that essentially previous generations of their battalion played. So starting with the South Korean perspective, I thought would be very interesting and bring in that crucial perspective of how does the homeland on which this battle occurred, what is their reaction? How do they cover it in their news media? The next one is the CBC News coverage from 2015. And the third one is coverage from Oh, this is a interview with the Korean War Legacy Foundation, which is in fact a American foundation to capture the voices of veterans of the Korean War, but they interviewed a great number of Canadians, and I was very honored to be able to review some of those transcripts in finding primary source material for this project. So we have a South Korean source, a Canadian source, and an American source that this interview is with a Canadian veteran. Who is involved in fact, a lot of the sources you will find about the Korean War. It's, in fact, a lot of the same voices being interviewed several times, which is interesting in itself. So those are the three sources that students will investigate in both the grade 6 and grade 10 lessons. And then once they have annotated their quotes and found evidence of significance, they will go quote by quote and just write brief jot notes about whether there's evidence of the Canada-Korean relationship and whether or not the quote establishes historical significance based on the criteria you are using, either the ones we are proposing or the ones that you would like to use in your class based on what you've already done previously with your students. And then after watching each of the three sources, reflect. Does this source support our claim about history? Based on our criteria, can we support the claim that the Imjin River hockey game is a significant aspect of the Korean War's legacy? This is an inquiry question. There are right or wrong ways to argue it. There is good or bad argumentation. There is good or bad thinking. There is thinking in greater or lesser depth, but there is not one correct answer here. Students should come to a conclusion that they can defend. And then once student pairs have analyzed the sources, student groups should come together as I proposed in the lesson plan, compare their notes, compare their annotations, and then together use these sentence starters to make a claim about history. We have evidence of this criterion from this source. The evidence tells us that the Imjin Classic is or is not significant, or they could say relevant, it is remembered, or whatever other criteria you are using. Perhaps it had a significant impact on the people that who participated, or that it established relationships between countries, or whatever criteria you would like to use. Finally, the Canada-Korean relationship is or is not relevant to this evidence. And if you explore the resource, you will see that, for example, the Korean defense attaché in Canada made rather a wry comment in the CBC News footage that, like, well, hockey isn't really a significant game in Korea, but evidently the veterans and current members of the two battalions have incorporated hockey into the relationship between these two countries from their own perspective. So again, this is a very arguable claim about history, and students could go one way or the other, or surprise us, as could happen. And then in the consolidation, once the student groups have compared their notes and attempted a claim about history, we have proposed a gallery walk where students could walk around the class, look at each other's responses, and leave Post-its, either acknowledging how they have used the criteria, acknowledging the incorporation of evidence, which of course we always want to happen, regardless of what historical thinking concept we are using. We should always be incorporating evidence whenever we do. So for example, you use the quotes well, you used good evidence for remarkable, or constructive criticism. If you're talking about who remembers the game, remembering being one of the 5 R's, make it clear who the game is remembered by. Is it the Canadians? Is it the Koreans? It's not clear yet. So hopefully students are brave enough to do that kind of thing. And then finally, students will individually reflect on what they're learning. So overall, does your class support the claim that the hockey game is a significant part of the Korean War's legacy? How did the groups go? How many groups were in favor? How many groups were against this event being significant? How well did your group use evidence compared to other groups? And finally, what questions do you still or now have? As usual, any of this can be adapted to the needs and interests of your class, but I do think it's a good idea to end it with some individual reflection that they could note down in a notebook or in a document that they can use then to reflect back later for final assessment or whatever is appropriate in your context. Lastly, in the grade 6 context, it is in fact the same sources and largely the same quotes, but we focus more on the interrelationships aspect, notably the Canada-Korea relationship. So the idea with the grade 6 version of the lesson is that you would start with these 4 concepts: Canada, Korea, the Korean War, and hockey. And then by analyzing the sources, are students able to establish interrelationships between those 4 concepts with whatever visual aid they might want to use, with the allowance, of course, that you as the teacher might deem it appropriate to just select a visual aid for them, an organizer for them, or give them just 2 options, or whatever is most appropriate. But establishing the interrelationships based on the sources, still based on the evidence, would be the key point there. And then we are going to conclude our webinar today by showing you all the inquiry questions. So on the left, we have the grade 6 social studies questions. And on the right, we have the grade 10 Canadian history inquiry questions. Once again, each grade 6 lesson has a corresponding grade 10 lesson, which is largely based on the exact same primary and secondary sources, but with a different depth and perspective on the specific inquiry that is asked of the class.
Great, thank you, Korto. Sarah just had to step away, so I'll pick up the thread here. So yeah, just to also note that many of the grade 10 sources are a little bit more expanded. Even though it's the same person speaking, we may give like a longer excerpt or from the transcript or something else. So yeah, so thank you so much for sharing those resources with us. I did put the link in the chat here, so you can go directly to the Korean War lessons page on our website, and you'll see all the lessons in both French and English. We are having a French webinar on Thursday. So if you have any colleagues that would like to attend that, we'll go over the French lessons, which are mostly the same, slight differences. And you can see all of the lessons there, all 4 lessons. The only other thing I'd like to say before we end the recording is just that also on our website, you'll see that there's an opportunity for teachers to attend the 2023 World Congress of Teachers of the Korean War. So this is put on by the Korean War Legacy Foundation in the US, but it's focusing on Canada this year. So the Social Studies Educators Network of Canada, of which OHASSTA is a member, and of which I am actually the president of that organization, we're partnering with the Korean War Legacy Foundation to put on this event in Vancouver. So it's a very heavily subsidized teacher event. It's open to Canadian teachers, grades 4 to 12, I think, or 6 to 12. Yeah, grade 6 to 12. So anybody that might be teaching about the Korean War, it's 2 days, and it'll be a fantastic learning opportunity to delve into these resources, as well as the more extensive resources that the Social Studies Network put together over the last few years. And that is all for the formal part of the webinar. I will just end the recording, and then we'll take any questions that you have.